The first time I heard it, I thought it was the wind. A soft, wet sound, like lips parting in the dark, sticky with saliva. It seemed to emanate from the very air itself. A presence felt rather than heard. But then it whispered my name, in a voice that was a discordant scrape, a chorus of dry leaves and cracking bone, utterly devoid of anything human. It wasn't my voice, not the voice of anyone I knew. It was ancient, patient, and intimately aware of me. That's when the cold certainty settled in my gut. The walls of my new house were not merely old, they were occupied. I had moved into the old Victorian on Holloway Lane, because the price felt like a misprint. A siren song luring me onto the rocks of what I now understand was inevitable damnation. The realtor, a woman whose forced cheer felt brittle enough to shatter, had practically shoved the keys into my hand. Her smile was a rictus, stretched far too tight over her teeth. "It's got character," she'd said, her eyes darting nervously towards the shadowed upper windows. That word, character, was meant to explain away the deep resonant groans of the floorboards at night. Sounds less like settling wood, and more like the shifting weight of something immense and slumbering beneath. It was meant to excuse the way shadows seem to pool in corners, even on the brightest days, clinging like damp velvet. The first week was a deceptive calm, an unnerving, pregnant silence that pressed against my eardrums, thick and heavy, like water. No settling creaks, no drafts whistling through ill-fitting frames, just an absolute void of sound that felt fundamentally wrong. It was the quiet of a predator holding its breath, waiting. Then, on the 8th night, I was wrenched from sleep by the sound of scratching. Not the frantic skittering of mice, not the determined gnawing of rats. This was slow, deliberate, the sound of something with long, impossibly sharp fingernails, dragging with excruciating care down the inside of my bedroom wall, tracing paths only inches from my head. I lay paralyzed, my breath caught in my throat, every muscle screaming to flee. The scratching paused, leaving behind a ringing silence that was somehow worse. Then, so close it felt like it came from within my own skull, a breathy, sibilant voice sighed, a sound thick with graveyard damp and amusement. "You're listening." I bolted upright, a strangled cry dying in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room was empty, bathed in the weak, watery moonlight, filtering through the dusty panes. The walls stood smooth and impassive, betraying nothing. But the air was thick with a cloying haze, the unmistakable stench of freshly turned earth, damp and heavy, interwoven with the stomach-churning sweetness of rotting meat. Sleep paralysis, I told myself frantically. A vivid nightmare triggered by the stress of the move, the unfamiliar house. My rational mind clung to these explanations like a drowning man to driftwood, but the stench lingered, faint but undeniable, clinging to the back of my throat. The next night, the illusion of control shattered completely. The scratching returned, more insistent this time, exploring the boundaries of the plaster. And the voice, it didn't come from beside my ear. It slithered out from the tarnished brass vent, set high in the wall above my bed, a location that made escape feel utterly impossible. "Do you know what's inside the walls?" it murmured, each syllable drawn out, dripping with a dark, knowing intimacy. It wasn't just a question. It felt like an invitation to madness. "We've been waiting." Sleep became a forgotten luxury. Fueled by terror and caffeine, I refused to close my eyes. Instead, I pressed my ear flat against the cold plaster, straining to decipher the secrets held within. The silence stretched, taut, and expectant. Was I imagining it? Was I losing my mind? Then tap. A pause long enough to make me doubt my senses. Tap. Another pause, infinitesimally longer. Tap. 3 distinct, deliberate knocks, emanating not from the surface, but from deep within the house's skeletal structure. It wasn't random. It was a response, a confirmation. The next day, consumed by a desperate need for answers, I attacked the bedroom wallpaper. My nails tore through layers of faded floral patterns, brittle and yellowed with age, shredding decades of accumulated history and stale adhesive. Beneath it, the plaster was a roadmap of fractures, jagged lines spiderwebbing across the surface, as if immense pressure had been applied from the other side. Something had been pushing, testing the limits, trying to break through. And in one specific spot, low down near the baseboard, the texture changed. The plaster was soft, yielding, disturbingly damp, and impossibly warm. A wave of nausea hit me as my fingers sank slightly into the yielding surface, recoiling as if burned. It felt sickeningly organic, like probing cold, damp flesh beneath a thin, calcified skin. The house itself felt like it was breathing, its respiration slow and diseased. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to abandon the house and never look back. Flee, escape, survive. But a horrifying paralysis had taken root, because now, the whispers were accompanied by flashes behind my closed eyelids, brief, sickening glimpses of what lay beyond the plaster. Pale, elongated figures folding and unfolding themselves in the cramped darkness, limbs bending at unnatural angles, joints clicking softly. They moved with a fluid, insectile grace, their featureless faces turned towards me, hollow eyes fixing on my presence with unnerving focus. The tapping echoed my own movements. A footstep in the hall was answered by a thump from within the wall beside me. A cough was met with a wet, gurgling sound from the vent. They were mimicking me, studying me, and they were definitely learning how to knock back. I reached my breaking point in the dead heart of the night, around 3 a.m. The whispers had crescendoed into a chaotic, multi-voiced chorus. A dissonant litany that scraped at the edges of my sanity. Driven by sheer, unadulterated terror, I seized the heavy claw hammer I'd bought for repairs. With a guttural yell fueled by adrenaline and despair, I swung it with all my might into the soft, yielding spot in the wall. Plaster exploded outwards. Dust, thick with the smell of rot, and something else, something metallic and coppery, filled the air, choking me. And then silence. A sudden deafening cessation of all sound. For one fragile, beautiful second, a sliver of hope pierced the gloom. Had I done it? Had I broken the connection? Silenced them? Then the whole gasped. A wet, ragged, sucking inhalation, like a starving creature tasting fresh air for the first time in centuries. It was a sound of profound, horrifying need. And from the absolute blackness within that ragged opening, a single skeletal hand shot out with blinding speed. It was bone white, skin peeling away in translucent strips like wet paper, revealing glimpses of dark, glistening tendon beneath. Its fingers were impossibly long, tipped with jagged, broken nails, and they clamped around my wrist with crushing, icy strength. It pulled me forward, yanking me off balance with a power that defied its shriveled appearance. My shoulder slammed painfully against the broken edges of the plaster. My free hand scrabbled desperately at the floorboards, splintered wood digging deep under my nails, offering no purchase. The thing in the wall was merciless, driven by an ancient hunger, cold, foul breath, thick with the stench of the grave, and stagnant water, poured from the hole. The darkness inside writhed, shifted, stirred, a suggestion of multiple forms moving just beyond the veil. My face was inches from the opening, the absolute blackness promising unimaginable horrors. Then, just as I felt the ragged edge of the plaster scrape my cheek, the grip inexplicably loosened. The pressure vanished, with a wet, slithering sound, like something heavy being dragged through mud. The hand retreated back into the suffocating darkness within the wall. I scrambled backward, crab-walking frantically across the floor, gasping for air, my pulse a frantic drum against my eardrums. The hole gaped at me, a silent, black maw in the otherwise mundane wall. But it wasn't empty. I could feel it. The focused, malevolent attention pouring from that void. It was watching, waiting, assessing. Sleep was now an alien concept. By the first gray hint of dawn, my hands trembling uncontrollably, I found myself hunched over a microfiche reader in the dusty silence of the local library archives. The house had a history. Of course it did. Houses like this always did. The previous owner, a man named Elias Felt, described as reclusive and eccentric, had vanished without a trace in 1983. The official police investigation found no signs of struggle, no body, only a single cryptic note left neatly on the kitchen table, penned in a shaky hand. They won't stop singing to me. The music is inside the walls. Below the text was a crudely drawn symbol, a jagged spiral that seemed to twist inward infinitely. The brief newspaper article offered no further details on the state of the house. No mention of disturbed plaster or strange sounds. But as I switched off the humming machine, the librarian, an elderly woman with eyes clouded like cataracts over faded sapphires, materialized silently beside me. She leaned in, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "You're living in the Velt house, aren't you?" she whispered, her gaze fixed on the microfiche screen. I froze, my blood turning to ice water. A faint, unsettling smile touched her lips, but it never reached her eyes. Thought so. I recognized the address. She tapped a gnarled, age-spotted finger against the dusty desk. "Elias used to come here, you know. Spent hours, days, down in the basement archives, near the end." Her voice dropped lower, becoming conspiratorial, muttering constantly about the choir. Said their harmonies were inescapable. He'd hum sometimes. Strange, discordant tunes that made your teeth ache. She paused, leaning closer still, her breath smelling faintly of lavender and dust. "He stopped coming altogether when he claimed the walls started answering him back. Said they were inviting him to join the chorus." That night, armed with only a cheap flickering flashlight, I descended the narrow, creaking stairs into the cellar. The air grew instantly colder, thicker, heavy, with the smell of mildew, damp earth, and that persistent underlying metallic tang, the scent of old blood. I shouldn't have gone down there. Every rational thought, every primal instinct for self-preservation screamed against it. But the librarian's words, Velt's note, the symbol, they were pieces of a puzzle I felt compelled, against all reason, to solve. The flashlight beam, weak and uncertain, danced across rough-hewn stone walls. And then it caught them, markings. Symbols carved into the stone with frantic, jagged strokes, mirroring the spiral Velt had drawn, alongside other, more complex and disturbing geometries that seemed to writhe under the light. And there, positioned precisely in the center of the oppressive space, sat a single straight-backed wooden chair. It faced the far wall, a blank expanse of sweating stone. Its legs weren't just resting on the dirt floor. They were anchored, bolted securely into the packed earth below. As if someone had been made to sit there, or had chosen to sit there, watching, listening, waiting. For what? Then my flashlight beam wavered, sputtered, and in that heart-stopping split second of near darkness before it flickered back on, something moved at the periphery of my vision. A tall, impossibly thin shadow detaching itself from the deeper blackness behind a stack of rotting crates. A whisper colder than the cellar air brushed the back of my neck, intimate and possessive. "You shouldn't have come down here." Panic seized me. I turned and ran, stumbling blindly towards the stairs. As my foot hit the bottom step, the flashlight sputtered and died, plunging me into absolute suffocating blackness. That's when the tapping started again. Not just from one spot. Not just from the walls. It erupted from everywhere at once. The stone walls beside me, the low ceiling above, the packed earth floor beneath my feet, the very air vibrating around me. A complex, syncopated, mocking rhythm that seemed to claw its way inside my head, growing faster, more frantic, as I fumbled desperately upward in the dark. Then, a new sound cut through the dissonance, sharp and distinct. Click. A pause. Click. Louder this time. Click, the unmistakable sound of a heavy old-fashioned latch being drawn back. Not the cellar door latch. Oh God, not that one. This sound came from inside the walls. A door, somewhere in the hidden spaces, was opening. The blackness was absolute, leaving me submerged in a suffocating void. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me as the clicking sound echoed. Inside the walls, a lock disengaging, an ancient barrier falling. Then the tapping erupted, a riotous storm from every direction. The stone, the earth, the very air vibrating, with its frantic, mocking rhythm. I scrambled upward, hands clawing at the rough, unseen steps of the cellar stairs, my breath tearing raggedly in my chest. Each step groaned under my weight, a sound amplified hideously in the dark, announcing my position to whatever shared the blackness. I finally reached the top and burst through the cellar door into the hallway, slamming it shut behind me. A useless gesture, I knew, against something that lived within the walls. The house was a labyrinth of unseen obstacles and phantom touches, arms outstretched, fingers trembling. I navigated by memory and sheer terror. My hands brushed against something cold and smooth. A wall, then something draped and soft. A curtain I didn't remember hanging. Splinters snagged my skin as I grazed a doorframe. Each familiar object felt alien, distorted by the darkness and my own fear. The tapping pursued me, echoing my frantic footsteps, sometimes seeming to race ahead, waiting for me around unseen corners. Tap 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 from the grandfather clock, click scrape from the kitchen doorway. Then a new sound joined the riot, a low, wet, slithering, like something heavy and boneless, dragging itself across the floorboards just yards behind me. I didn't dare stop, I didn't dare slow down. Hyperventilating, lungs screaming for air they couldn't seem to draw enough of. I stumbled towards the main staircase. The air grew colder, thick with the cloying scent of rot and damp earth. Stronger here than it had been even in the cellar. It felt like I was wading through it. The stench clinging to my clothes, my skin, the back of my throat. I lurched forward, a strangled sob escaping my lips. Climbing the main stairs was an eternity of blind fumbling. My foot slipped on a tread, sending a jolt of terror up my spine as I windmilled my arms, barely catching the unseen banister. Its wood felt slick, coated in something faintly greasy. The tapping intensified, coming from the walls flanking the staircase now. A synchronized rhythmic drumming that seemed to bore directly into my skull. They knew where I was. They were driving me. Tears streamed down my face, blurring a darkness that couldn't be blurred. Sobs racked my body, violent and uncontrollable, each gasp painful in my burning lungs. Was that a whisper, tangled within my own gasping breaths, slithering directly into my ear? Coming for you. Taste. I clamped my hands over my ears, stumbling sideways, crashing painfully against the wall. The impact jarred me, but the whispers seemed to follow, originating now from inside my own head. Finally, blessedly, my outstretched hand hit the familiar wood of my bedroom door. Hope, fragile and desperate, surged through me. I fumbled frantically for the knob, my fingers slick with sweat, slipping on the cool metal. The slithering sound was closer now, just at the end of the hallway, accompanied by a soft, wet clicking, like saliva dripping from unseen jaws. With a final desperate twist, the knob turned. I threw myself into the room, slamming the door shut with all my remaining strength, the heavy oak shuddering in its frame. Only then, leaning back against the wood, heart hammering like it might burst, did I allow the full weight of the hysterical sobs to consume me, safe only in the most fragile, relative sense of the word. I shoved the heavy oak dresser against the door, wedging it tight. With shaking hands, I tore open the box of table salt I'd bought weeks ago for cooking, and poured a thick, trembling line across the threshold. a pathetic, flimsy ward against the encroaching nightmare. But the house was fully awake now, alive and furious. I could hear them moving, no longer trying to be subtle. A constant dry shuffling from multiple directions. A wet, slithering sound, like slugs crawling over bone and their bony fingers. I could hear them, feel them, tracing the plaster on the other side, searching, probing, testing. And then the first voice I'd heard, the dry scraping whisper that knew my name, returned, now amplified, guttural, resonating with a ravenous predatory hunger. You opened the wall. You let us taste the air. You let us taste you. A wet, choking, slurping sound echoed from the direction of the hole in the wall, hideously amplified in the tense silence. Suddenly, the air grew thick with that metallic tang again, stronger now, coppery and sharp, the smell of blood. My blood. Because when I dared to look down at my wrist the skeletal hand had seized, it was slick and glistening, not with sweat, but with a thick, viscous, black fluid that oozed sluggishly from the faint red marks left by those chilling fingers. It didn't hurt, but its presence was a violation far deeper than any pain. It spread slowly, staining my skin, feeling unnaturally cold. And from the darkness of the hole, I heard a sound that shattered the last remnants of my composure. The sound of something inside the wall, licking its lips. I'm writing this now by the flickering, guttering light of a single candle. The power failed hours ago, plunging the house into an even deeper darkness. It wasn't a storm. The night outside is still and clear. They cut it, or drained it. I don't think they can come into the light. Such a small, fragile thing to depend my life on. They're singing now, not whispering. A low, monotonous, droning hymn that vibrates deep within my bones, shaking my teeth in their sockets. It's a discordant, ancient melody that speaks of empty spaces and infinite hunger. It coils in my stomach, making me nauseous and dizzy. The barricade. The dresser. It's starting to scrape against the floorboards. Something is pushing steadily from the other side. The wood groans in protest. It won't hold much longer. I can see the plaster wall opposite me bulging slowly inward, stretching, cracking, like something immense and patient is leaning its full weight against it, testing its strength before the final push. Fine dust drifts down like diseased snow, through a new crack that just zippered open. I thought I saw an eye. Wet, black, and reflecting the candlelight. And the hole I made. The gateway. It looks different. It seems bigger somehow. Wider. Darker. If such a thing were possible. And it's dripping that same black ichor that stains my wrist. Thick drops splattering softly onto the floorboards below. Pooling. I think the singing is an invitation. They're inviting me to join the choir, to step through the hole and into the spaces between. Or maybe they're just tired of waiting to come out. Either way, the candle flickers violently. The pushing against the door intensifies. The singing swells. The page ends here, stained with a dark, sticky substance near the jagged tear at the bottom. The candle was found burned down to a blackened stub on the floorboards, when authorities finally forced entry days later. The house on Holloway Lane was empty. The hole in the bedroom wall remained, dark and silent. But the new owners, drawn by the same impossibly low price, have begun reporting strange sounds, especially at night. A faint, discordant singing, and sometimes, late at night, a soft, insistent tapping, especially from within the walls.